everyone, I'm Joanna Penn from thecreativepenn.com and today I'm here with Gwen Hernandez. Welcome, Gwen.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Great to have you on the show. So I'll just introduce you. So Gwen is the author of Scrivener for Dummies, which we're going to talk about today. And she also runs classes teaching people how to use Scrivener, which is awesome software we're going to tell you all about. And she's also an award-winning romantic novelist, so it's exciting. So Gwen, tell us a bit more about you and your writing background.
Okay, I've been writing fiction for about 4 years. I'm not yet published. I just finaled in a nice contest, a few of them. And I have a pretty strong background in technical writing as well, though, because I was a manufacturing engineer and a programmer and a business school instructor. So I've done a lot of technical documentation and that kind of thing.
Fantastic. So, and how did you get the chance to write this book?
Actually, Wiley found me on Twitter. They asked around for experts, got some names, and sent emails out to everyone asking if we were interested in submitting a proposal. And I actually thought maybe it was a hoax at first, but it turned out to be legitimate, and so I submitted it, and they picked mine.
Right, so for anyone who doesn't actually know, although I talk about it all the time to be honest, what is Scrivener anyway, and what does it do for your own writing life?
Scrivener is writing software, but it's a couple steps above a standard word processor. So that's kind of the basics of it. For me, the biggest thing it did was allowed me to write in the way that works for me. So instead of being forced to write in a single linear document from start to finish and trying to figure out what to do with ideas I had, or you know, if I wanted to stick something in back in a previous section, Word doesn't make that very easy. And if you want to divide it into chapters or scenes, you have to save them all separately. Whereas in Scrivener, that all just works so easily. It's very instinctive once you kind of get to know how to use it, I think.
No, I totally agree with you, and I'm the same. I don't write in order, so it was kind of life-changing to be able to move things around, and we'll talk a bit more about the functionality in a minute. So how did you discover Scrivener in the first place?
Actually, a friend of mine recommended it. It was one of my early writing chapter meetings. I had just met her, and she noticed my email was a Mac email, and that's back when Scrivener was Mac only. And she said, "Oh my gosh, I have this software. You have to try it." And I thought, okay, what's writing software, you know? But life changer.
Yeah, and that's so funny because I was on a PC a few years ago and I changed to a Mac. One of the reasons was for Scrivener before they had a Windows option, although now we should say they do have one, so everyone,
Yes.
you know, there's no excuse for anyone really. But what I also, and why I asked you that is because what I think about Scrivener is it's a real word of mouth. You know, every author seems to pass it on to other authors, and that's why it's so popular, because it
Right.
just spreads through it being so good to use.
Right. Just like book recommendations, you're more likely to trust a recommendation from a friend. So.
Yeah, exactly, and from people who actually use it, so that's awesome. Okay, and what about people, you know, I'm writing novels now, but what types of books is Scrivener good for?
Anything, I think. I've written fiction in it. I wrote Scrivener for Dummies in it. In fact, I think it would have been really hard to manage a project like that without, you know, a Scrivener or some kind of writing management software, because it just helps me keep track of where I am in the process for each chapter, and keeping old versions and all my materials in one place and jotting down notes for myself, and you know, all those things are just so easy to do in there, and it really keeps me organized.
And what about non-fiction in particular and people who are doing research projects? How does it help them?
It's amazing for research because you can store, there's actually several ways you can store your research in Scrivener. You can import a file. So if you have a PDF or even a web page, anything, any kind of documents that you have, and you want to have quick, easy access to them right there, you can just import them and save them in a separate folder, like a research folder. But you can also link to things. So you can link to web pages, they're called references. You can link to documents on your computer, If you don't want to store them within Scrivener, but you still want to have quick, easy access to them, that's another way to do it. I copy and paste in like emails. I have a guy that he helps me with guns or whatever. And so every time he sends me a response, I copy and paste it into a document in my research section. So I don't have to go looking for the email. It's just right there with my project. If I go write somewhere away from home, or if I want to save it and write it on another computer even, it's all there.
No, that's fantastic. And what about footnotes and things for...
Oh, yeah. You can do footnotes and endnotes in Scrivener. And then you just deal with how you want them to work when you export it. I have a chapter on them in the book, which so it goes into a pretty good amount of detail on it. But they're actually relatively easy in Scrivener. And it actually works with bibliography and citation software. It doesn't put it all in there for you, but you can open your bibliography software from right within Scrivener and copy and paste and things like that to make it a little bit easier. So academics can use it too.
And there are templates, aren't there?
Yeah, there's actually a couple kinds of templates. Templates for the actual projects. So if you write all types of projects, you can use a fiction project for your novel, a nonfiction template for your nonfiction project. They have poetry, radio shows, recipes, and then you can customize them so that as you start working in Scrivener and you realize, well, I don't need these parts, but I always want these folders and that kind of thing, you can save your own templates. And that makes it a lot easier so you don't have to recreate everything you've done if you're working the same way.
No, I totally agree. And I think I keep finding new things and thinking, oh, wow, I could actually use it for that project or, the other project. And yeah, so that's really good. So let's sort of start from the beginning. If somebody brand new starts with Scrivener, what are sort of the top two things that they'll probably start out by using?
Well, I think aside from the editor, which is pretty obvious, you just sit down and start typing. I think the binder is something that a lot of new writers find helpful. Not new writers, but new to Scrivener writers, because it's sort of I don't know, not an epiphany, but I don't know, it just makes me happy when I can see my entire project all laid out, every scene. I tend to organize into chapters after I have the scenes written, but I work in parts, so I'll have part 1 through 4 folders, and then I put the scenes in the part folders, and I can instantly see, do I have enough scenes in there? If I'm getting close to the first turning point, am I close to the word count that I need? Just things like that are so easy to see at a glance. And then I think also the synopsis is something that it's pretty easy for the new user to find because it's right there when you open up the program. And you can also see the synopsis from the corkboard view. But that's where you can either write a little brief outline of your scene or maybe the purpose of the scene. I usually use it for, in fiction, to keep track of like the goal, conflict, and disaster, or a couple of questions that I always want to ask myself before I start to make sure I know where I'm going. So I think those are probably the easiest things for the beginners and the ones that they see first thing.
So I think the way you're talking there, you sound like quite a plotter. Would you say that?
I'm kind of a hybrid. I tend to resist plotting, but I'm trying to do more of it. And I definitely try to make sure that before I start the scene, I have at least the goal of the character figured out. And sometimes I forget, but I try to do that. I try to make sure it's in there so I know that the scene is relevant.
Right. So maybe explain how because some people are just pantsers, right? So they would just open up and I never know what things are called, but there's a view in Scrivener you can just open up and just type.
Right, the editor.
Yeah, the editor.
It's the main view, and it's the one that comes up by default, and you can just create a new document and start writing.
You don't have to break it down into the way you're saying, but what happens is if you do break it down that way, it is much easier to do. So I'm the same as you. I think what the penny for me was like by creating, and I'm a bit of a hybrid too, but I tend to go in and kind of create 20 one-liners, which are my 20 one-liner scenes.
Okay.
And then I open that up and I write that scene, and it could be anywhere in the book. So I'm a bit like you know, not as organized as you with parts and things, but I just put in a load of stuff. But I think the important point is that either way it can help you.
Absolutely. I think Scrivener's biggest thing is that it's so flexible, and a lot of people, if they're pantsers, they think, oh, Scrivener won't work for me because I'm not a plotter, I don't need to be that organized. And that's definitely not true. In fact, if anything, I think it makes your life easier because pantsers, by default, generally have to do a lot of moving around, editing, trying to find things because they're not really planning it out before they go. So it helps you sort of put some organization on what you're doing to make your job easier when you get into things like revisions and stuff.
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, with my my first book, I wrote without Scrivener, and then I ended up putting it into Scrivener to do another rewrite, and you know, pasting in the scenes, and that really helped me. And also, I think it helps people with a synopsis, actually writing a synopsis for an agent, if they want to do that, because it does help you organise even later on. So I guess I'm saying even if you've got a book, you can use it to re-edit it, for example.
Absolutely. And by having it in Scrivener, it's so easily searchable, and you know, you can categorize everything. So you know, you can apply all that organization stuff after the fact. Like I said, I tend to write my scenes, just break them into logical chunks, but then organize them into chapters after I've gone through the first draft of editing, because I don't necessarily know where a good chapter ending is until I've gone back through it again.
No,
So,
I totally agree. Yeah.
yeah.
So I wondered, you know, I'm a kind of intermediate user then. I'm terrible at doing sort of, you know, watching help videos, and it was great having your book actually, because I'm terrible at using help books, but I got to kind of look through it and go, oh, I didn't know that and I didn't know that. So I wondered if you would kind of give someone at my level, someone who's used the basics, what are two things that, you know, I might not know about that are quite exciting?
Okay. I think using the label field and color coding your scenes is huge. That's one of the things I love the most about Scrivener. And I know you mentioned that you weren't really sure
I want
how
to know
that
about
worked.
that. Yeah.
So it's just you can edit the label field to be anything you want. So for my fiction, I usually do point of view, and I mostly write in just 2 points of view, the hero and the heroine. Sometimes I'll have a villain or something like that. So I do pink and blue, and I turn on the color, the icon color for that. And then I can, at a quick glance, I can see pink, blue, pink, blue, pink, blue, or pink, pink, blue, pink, you know, I can see kind of whether I'm balanced or not as far as who's getting the most time in their point of view. In certain lines, like if somebody writes for like Harlequin or something, for example, they actually expect a certain balance, like 60-40 hero or something like that. So in that case, it would really be helpful. But just immediately I can tell whose point of view the scene's in, and that helps me figure out if that's the scene I was looking for. For my nonfiction, I tended to use it for keeping track of the status of that chapter. I wrote Scrivener for Dummies in chapters, and what I did is set up values for, like, is it in the first draft stage? Is it in editorial review? Has it come back to me for author review? Is it the final format? You know, that kind of thing. And then I could quickly open it up. Okay, I need to work on chapter 11. You know, all the other ones are done for now or whatever. So that made it easy to kind of keep track of what I still needed to work on. And then I use it for blog posts and all sorts of stuff. So I color code by which blog site it's on, that kind of thing. So it's kind of endless. You can do whatever you want. Theme, setting, species, I don't know, whatever you can think of. You could use it if you want to have a quick glance view of it.
Yeah.
The other thing that I thought would be great for intermediate users, really anybody, but is the full screen or composition mode.
Hmm.
And what that lets you do is kind of, the regular editor view has the two columns on each side, the binder and the inspector, and those can be a little bit distracting because there's so much there to look at. So if you want to kind of go into your little place of zen or whatever, full screen mode just blocks out everything else. You can customize the background color. Blue's good for creative, red's good for editing. And in the Mac version right now, you can do an actual image even, which I'm sure is coming to Windows. They're trying to catch up. So I'll do either some kind of nice soothing scene like Switzerland or the beach, or if I'm trying to keep the mood, like I was writing a scene in Dubai, so I had like the Dubai skyline, or if I'm writing a scene in, say, Georgetown in DC, I'll have a picture of all the row houses. So the background image can kind of keep me in the mode of my scene, kind of in that mood. So,
oh, that's good. No, that's the mode I meant. I write a lot in that mode and just block everything else out. So it's kind of like there is no. It's just like having nothing else on your computer except this big white screen, right? And I'm using that for NaNoWriMo at the moment. So that really, and actually, what I'm doing at the same time is you can pop out the project targets. Can't you? It pops out as a little thing, and I put that on the screen as well. And I put in 50,000 for the month, and then 2,000 for every writing session, and you see the little status bar going along, don't you?
yeah, project targets is excellent, especially if you're trying to, if you're on a deadline or you're just trying to kind of give yourself something to work towards every time you sit down. You can set a session goal. And you can even set targets on individual documents if you want. So if you had to sit down and write a magazine article or a blog post and you knew you wanted it to be 1,000 words to fill the column space or whatever, you could just set a document target for. So yeah, targets are very handy.
Oh, that's good. Actually, just while we're on that, I wanted to ask you, and someone asked me the other day about projects on Scrivener. So do you create a new project for a new book? Or if you have a series, would you just keep the same project and just add kind of new bits to it?
Okay, I'm laughing because that comes up in every class. It really comes down to your preference. I know people who do it both ways. So I would my preference is to create a project for each book because I find that if I do a whole series, it gets very cluttered really quickly. And if I'm trying to compile from different books, it's kind of messy. But I also understand the idea of if you have a lot of recurring information, you hate to duplicate. One thing that makes that a little easier, though, is you can open up two projects side by side and just drag things over from one binder to the next.
Oh, that's good.
So if you do want to bring in things, not everything's going to overlap even in the same series, right? Because your book's going to probably have a different storyline and different background, different research and stuff. So you can bring over what you need, but then still be working in your own individual project. Another option I recommended is to create a project that's just your series Bible and keep all of the series specific stuff in there. Then you do a separate project for each book. And you can have more than one project open at a time, just like you can have more than one document open in Word. So you could keep your series Bible open in the background, have your book open, and then just refer as needed. So several ways to do that, and it really just comes down to preference. And I think probably you would need to play with it a little bit and just see what works best for you.
No, absolutely. And I need to do a series Bible. That's definitely a good idea. That's something that I've thought about a lot, and now I have to keep looking back and thinking, what did I do there? And I know we've got to do it, and I'm resisting, but maybe that's the way to do it, is just to, like you say, maybe paste some things into a new project and keep them separate. No, I like that.
And you can even create a template that's specific to that series. So after you've written the first book, your template could include all of the elements that you need in all the other books, including all of your labels and status values, so that affects your color coding if you wanted them. All of the research and things like that you have in there, everything could just be part of your template. That way when you create your next book in the series, the template would have all of that already there ready to go, and you would just write the book.
No, that's awesome. Now, I wanted to talk about the compile function, which I think is, and in fact is one of the reasons I tell people to go buy Scrivener, is even if they're not going to write in it, they can use it to compile their Kindle books, they can use it to compile ePub or PDF or Word or whatever else they want to do. So can you first of all explain what the compile function is?
Sure. Compile is just how you take all those individual scenes and chapters and compile them into one final output document. And like you said, it can be just about any format you can think of that you turn it into. So it's essentially exporting your work.
Yeah, and it's funny because you the way you talk about it is like, oh, it's just like this, but I don't think people realize until they do it like how amazing it is, especially when like we've talked about, you can drag and drop scenes around. So somebody who uses Word, for example, they would have to cut a whole section, paste it somewhere else, check it all, but we can just move a scene somewhere else, recompile, and it's done in the new order, right?
Yes. And in fact, you can choose to exclude certain scenes. If, for example, if you get a request from an agent for a partial, for, first 3 chapters or something, you select the first 3 chapters, and that's all that comes out. And you don't have, whereas in Word, I would have to go in, save a new copy, chop everything below the 3 chapters, and now I've got 2 documents saved. One's a partial, one's not, and it's going to get changed again. So when I send it to the next agent, I have to create another one because I've probably done revisions. So in Scrivener, you don't have to worry about having all these copies all over your hard drive. You go in, and every time you're ready, you just compile whatever you need. So I can turn around after making the partial for an agent, and I can create an ePub of my entire manuscript to send to my critique partner so that she can go through it for me. So it's and I don't have to do any of that formatting manually on my actual writing. So I can write in whatever font size, color, anything I want with whatever kind of margins, and so you can kind of customize the writing experience, and it doesn't affect your output.
Yeah, exactly. And because people are paying for formatting these days.
Yes. So ePub and also the Kindle, you can create both of those through Scrivener. And I did check, and Kindle still works because, which I kind of figured it did, but Scrivener uses Amazon's Kindle Gen software in order to create those Mobi files. And so it's basically the same thing Amazon does when you upload files to their site. They use that same software. So everything's okay coming through from Scrivener.
Fantastic. And the only thing I've been having to do is download Word for Smashwords. But now Smashwords, I think by the end of the year, will accept ePub. So...
Okay.
Yeah, so that pretty much means Scrivener is a full service formatting, and it's not very. What is it? 49 US?
45 US for Mac and 40 for Windows. So it's incredibly cheap considering you're getting all that, plus the formatting is included.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and that's what I think too. So even if people don't want to write in it, like if you want to write in Word, carry on writing in Word, but then, paste it in and use it for even just compiling, because, if you think about how much it's going to cost you, at least $50 every time to get somebody to professionally format for Kindle. So for me, it really makes the whole process very, very easy. And it doesn't, and I just played around with the formatting. I should have probably read the help file, but it's not that hard to figure out without reading all, everything, is it? And it's all in your book.
I have 2 chapters on it in my book. It can be a little intimidating because there are a lot of options in there. Most of them you don't need to worry about, especially because it comes loaded with presets. So one for standard manuscript, one for ebook, and it does a pretty good job right out the gate with those. Sometimes people get funny things like double chapter headings, and they're not sure how to deal with that, which is in my book and it's on my website. But for the most part, you can get a pretty good, clean output with very little work. And if you get something set up exactly the way you want it and it works perfectly, you can save your own presets, and then you don't have to worry about it ever again. And those will work across all your projects. So.
Yeah, and I've got to say it again to everybody. The compile thing is amazing because, so I mean, when I was paying someone to do formatting for me, like when I produced a new book and I wanted to change the end matter of the last book to say now the book is click here to buy the new book, or because every time you put out another book, you want to change things, don't you? In the last book to add in a free chapter or whatever. So it meant that I could just change those books really easily, and I know that as you write more, and friends who have like 16 books, 20 books, and you want to change all of those every time, just having it there to do is extremely easy. So I can't stress enough how important doing your own formatting is, really. I think I've made the point, haven't I?
Yeah.
That's good. I'm glad we agree on this. Oh, and I should have said up front, it's not like you or I make any money from Scrivener, the software. We're doing this for the love of it. I know you've got a book on it, but you also wrote the book for the love of it as well. So, that's fantastic. I did want to tackle any criticisms of Scrivener. One criticism I've heard is that it's very hard for co-authors to write collaboratively on the same project. What do you think about that?
Yes and no. If you were writing with anybody in any platform, you can't work on the same file at the same time. So that really doesn't matter if you're using Word or anything. And Scrivener's the same way. However, as long as you're both using Scrivener, it's very easy to collaborate. You can just save your file to Dropbox. Mm-hmm. And when you just have to coordinate so you're not trying to open it at the same time. Other than that, you don't even have to both be using the Mac version or both the Windows version. It doesn't matter. You can the files work in both. So as long as the person closes the file before when they're done with it, and then before you open it, it really should be pretty smooth. You just have to work out your schedules. Right. If you're collaborating with somebody who's working in Word, it's a little bit more work because you first have to output it to a document format that they can read, and then bringing their changes back in isn't as easy. When I'm working with an editor or a critique partner from Word, if they use track changes or whatever, I tend to just plug in a second monitor, open up Word on one monitor and Scrivener on the other, and I just look at their suggestions, make my changes directly into Scrivener after taking a snapshot.
Yeah, just explain a snapshot.
Okay, snapshots just let you keep versions, basically. So it's literally like taking a picture of your file before you start overwriting it, and that way you don't lose any of your old words. And I'm kind of a big proponent of keeping all of my words. Because I do have a tendency to go back and think, oh, I should put that conversation back in, or I really liked the way I said that before. You can go find that very easily.
That's a new thing for me. I just learned something because I've been exporting draft versions, and making into Word documents and keeping them as kind of my backup versions as I go.
Well, and this is all within Scrivener, and you do it one document at a time. So you would take a snapshot of a scene before you start editing, for example. And when I was doing Scrivener for Dummies, what I did was before I brought in the updated version that I had, I did eventually have to work in Word because they have a special style formatting. But then I would paste it back in as the newest version. I would take a snapshot of the original, paste it in, and then that way I had every sort of iteration of the chapters that I wrote. The other thing I'll do sometimes is if it's a whole scene that I'm sort of taking out or just revising from scratch, I will just move it to an unused scenes folder that I always create, and then just create a new scene. So that's kind of another form of backup for the individual scenes. And then if you wanted to back up your whole project, aside from like automated backup, which I talk about in my book, you can also just save a version. Just do a save as, and I find that good if you're going to do like a total sort of project rewrite, but you want to keep your earlier version. It might just be easier to save as and call this old version or version 1 or whatever. There's a couple different ways to handle that.
Yeah, I just copied the whole project when I did a major rewrite. and just had a whole new project. But no, as you say, there's lots of ways to do it. And what I don't want people to think is that this is, because I mean, you're obviously quite technical, I'm reasonably technical, but you don't have to be technical to use it, do you?
Not really. I know plenty of people who don't feel very computer savvy who use Scrivener. They may not be expert users that use all of the amazing features, but they still find something in it that they can use. And most people can open it up and get started writing.
The book, just tell us anything else about the book. You know, what will people find in the book that will be useful to them?
Almost everything. I start with the basics. So for somebody who's not very familiar with it, do an overview of all the parts of the screen, the terminology. And I find that's actually good for people who've been using it for a while too, because they don't necessarily know what everything's called, or they started using it and just got into it and forgot to look around after that.
That's me.
That's everybody. I mean, that's how we use software in general, but there's just so much cool stuff out there that people don't know about. And so then I just try to kind of lead you through from the basics into some of the more exciting parts. And then go through things like compile and, even footnotes and annotations, which I should mention because I love those, where you can just jot down a note like, I don't know what to put here and keep writing, stuff like that. So I didn't necessarily cover things like using Dropbox or syncing between computers, partly because some of that changes pretty rapidly, and there's a lot of variables there, and it kind of gets outside of Scrivener. So I tried to put in the things that made the most sense to me based on what I'd been teaching in my classes and the kinds of questions that I get, and then the questions that Keith and the guys at Literature and Latte get. They were actually technical editors on this book, so they taught me a few things, made sure what I was writing was correct, and because even some of my stuff was based on what I'd been doing 2 years ago, and I didn't realize they'd added a new feature that made it easier or whatever. So they helped me figure out what kind of questions people have frequently through their tech support, and so we've tried to address those questions.
Fantastic. So where can people find you and the book?
Okay, the book should be everywhere. All the online retailers, at least in the U.S. It's in. I found it in my local Barnes and Noble, so it should be pretty much anywhere you like to shop for books. You can find me at gwenhernandez.com, GwenHernandez.com. And I have more information about the book, my classes, a whole section on Scrivener tips, which is basically all the blog posts I was doing before I started teaching and writing the book. So,
fantastic. Well, thanks ever so much for your time, Gwen. That was great.
Yeah, thanks for having me.